What if your last name is on a list that the Vatican spent 500 years trying to destroy? Not a metaphor, not a theory, an actual list. A record of specific female surnames that were systematically hunted, altered, phonetically disguised, and in many cases completely erased from European genealogical records between the 12th and 17th centuries. And the reason those names were targeted has nothing to do with crime, nothing to do with heresy in the way you were taught, and everything to do with who those women descended from. 7 surnames, 7 bloodlines, 7 families that carried something so dangerous to Rome that destroying their identity was considered a sacred duty by the men who ran the Inquisition. And if your family comes from southern France, northern Spain, the Italian coast, or the Celtic fringes of Britain, there is a real possibility that one of those surnames belongs to your maternal line. Stay with me, because what you are about to hear is not mythology. It is documented, it is traceable, and it was deliberately hidden from you. My name is not important. What is important is that you hear this while there is still time to trace it, because the records are being digitized right now. The archives are opening, and the families that were erased are being found. Let us begin with why the Vatican built a list in the first place. In 1209, Pope Innocent III launched the Albigensian Crusade against the Cathar communities of southern France. Official history teaches this as a campaign against heresy, but the internal documents of the Inquisition, now partially accessible through the Vatican Apostolic Archive and through the digitized records of the Languedoc Regional Archives in France, tell a more specific story. The inquisitors were not hunting random heretics. They were hunting specific families, and the instructions they received from Rome included something that almost no history textbook mentions. They were told to pay particular attention to the female lines. Why the female lines? Because in the tradition that Rome was trying to eradicate, sacred lineage passed through the mother, not the father, the mother. This is not an invented concept. It is the foundation of Jewish identity to this day. You are Jewish if your mother is Jewish, not your father, the mother. And according to traditions preserved in the Cathar communities of southern France, in the Celtic monasteries of Ireland and Wales, and in the Basque oral histories that survived the Inquisition in fragmented form, the most important lineage in the Christian world also passed through the mother, a lineage that traced directly to a woman whom Rome had spent centuries reducing to a footnote, Mary of Magdala. Now, before you dismiss that as familiar territory, understand what I am not saying. I am not saying what popular books have said. I am not repeating the theory you may have already heard. What the genealogical records show, what the Inquisition documents reveal, and what the surnames themselves encode, is something far more specific and far more verifiable than any book has told you. There were families, real families with real names, and those names are still findable in your family tree if you know what to look for. Here are the 7. The first surname is Magdalene, or its variants, Madelon, Madelon, as a family name rather than a given name, Magdalena appearing as a surname in Aragonese records, and the corrupted form Maudlin, found in English parish records after the Norman conquest. In the original Occitan of southern France, families carrying this name were concentrated in a specific corridor running from the coast of Provence through the Languedoc or the Pyrenees. This is not coincidental. This is the exact geographic corridor that the Albigensian Crusade targeted most intensively. When Inquisition records from the 13th and 14th centuries are cross-referenced with the disappearance of this surname from regional records. The correlation is not subtle. Between 1209 and 1330, the surname Magdalene and its variants effectively vanished from official French records in that region. Families did not die out. They renamed. They moved. They encoded the name into given names for daughters, passing the identity forward in a form that inquisitors could not easily track. The second surname is Miriam, or its European corruptions, Mirande, Miran, Mirand, and the Basque form Miren, which persists to this day in the Pyrenean communities on both the French and Spanish sides of the mountains. The Basque people are the oldest continuous population in Western Europe. Their language is unrelated to any other living language on Earth, and their oral tradition, collected partially by ethnographers in the 19th century before much of it was lost, contains references to a sacred feminine lineage associated with a woman who came from the east across the sea and who settled in what is now the Basque country. The Inquisition reached the Basque territories later than it reached the Languedoc, which is why fragments of this tradition survived that did not survive elsewhere. Families carrying the surname Mimerin, or its variants in the Basque records, can in some documented cases be traced to pre-Inquisition communities that held texts Rome had declared heretical. Those texts, fragments of which were found in cave deposits in the Pyrenees in the 1960s and 1970s, and are held in the archives of the University of Toulouse, contain genealogical records written in a mixture of Occitan and Proto-Basque that researchers have only partially decoded. The third surname is Salome, or its variants. Salome as a family name in Provence, Salme in Norman French, Salm in the Germanic border regions. Salome was the name of two women in the Gospel narratives who were present at the crucifixion and at the empty tomb. In the Gospel of Mark, which is the oldest of the four canonical Gospels, Salome appears by name among the women who witnessed the resurrection. In the Gospel of Philip, one of the texts found in Nag Hammadi in 1945 and suppressed by Rome since the 4th century, Salome appears in a context that suggests she was not simply a witness, but a teacher in the early community. Families carrying this surname in the Languedoc region were specifically listed in Inquisition documentation as suspected guardians of non-canonical texts. The surname Salm survives in Alsace-Lorraine and in Luxembourg, often in families that converted to Protestantism during the Reformation, which itself may represent a continuation of the impulse to resist Roman authority that characterized these lineages for centuries. The fourth surname is Tamar, or its variants, Tamara, the family name, Thamar in Portuguese records, Tamaro in northern Italian coastal communities. Tamar is one of the most significant women in the entire biblical genealogy. She appears in the lineage of David in the Book of Ruth and is named explicitly in the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew chapter 1. She is one of only 4 women Matthew names in that genealogy, which means whoever compiled that genealogy considered her presence essential. In the Catholic tradition, Tamar represented the continuity of the sacred feminine line across generations. Families carrying variants of this name in the Portuguese coastal communities and in the Ligurian coast of Italy show up in Inquisition records with disproportionate frequency relative to their population. Many converted to Catholicism on paper, while maintaining private traditions in the home, a practice documented extensively in the crypto-Jewish communities of the Iberian Peninsula, but also observed in what researchers have called crypto-Cather families in the same region. The fifth surname is Sophia, or its variants. Sophia is a family name in Greek and Italian records, Sophia in Spanish genealogical documents, and the rare but documented form Safia in Moorish-influenced southern Spanish communities. Sophia is the Greek word for wisdom. In early Christian theology, Sophia was understood as a divine feminine principle, the wisdom of God personified. In the Book of Proverbs, she speaks in the first person. In the Wisdom of Solomon, preserved in the Ethiopian Bible and declared apocryphal by Protestant traditions, she is described as a co-creator with God. In the Gnostic texts found at Nag Hammadi, she is a central figure in the divine narrative. Families carrying this as a surname rather than a given name appear in the genealogical records of communities that maintain traditions outside Roman Orthodoxy. In Catalonia, where the surname Sophia appears in notarial records from the 13th century, several families of this name were documented by inquisitors as possessing books that could not be identified as belonging to any recognized tradition. If these names are resonating with you, if you feel that pull of recognition, there is one book that every serious researcher in this lineage has read. It is called Holy Blood, Holy Grail. It is the foundation of everything this channel explores. The link is in the description below. Go there after this video. The sixth surname is Joanna, or its variants. Giovanna as a family name in Central Italian records, Juana appearing as a surname in Castilian documents, distinct from its use as a given name, and the archaic form Ioana found in Celtic Christian manuscripts from Ireland and Wales. Joanna is mentioned by name in the Gospel of Luke as one of the women who travelled with Jesus and who supported his ministry from their own resources. She is identified as the wife of Chusa, the manager of Herod's household, which means she came from the highest levels of the Herodian court. Her presence in the itinerant community around Jesus suggests a level of social risk that is rarely discussed. A woman of her position abandoning the court to follow a travelling preacher from Galilee was not a small decision. In Celtic Christian tradition, which developed independently of Rome from the 4th through the 8th centuries, Joanna was understood to have been among the women who carried the earliest teachings to the western regions. Families carrying her name as a surname in Irish and Welsh genealogical records, particularly those associated with the early monastic communities of Lough Derg and Bardsey Island, represent some of the oldest continuous Christian lineages in Britain, lineages that predated and never fully merged with Roman Christianity. The seventh surname is the one most likely to appear in your family tree without you recognizing it, because it was the most heavily encoded. The seventh surname is Maria, or its variants, used as a family name, Di Maria, as a family name in Italian notarial documents, Mariam, in Syriac Christian communities whose descendants reached Spain and Portugal through trade routes, and most significantly, the encoded form that appears across French records as La Marie or La Marie, a surname that looks like a place name or religious descriptor, but which genealogical researchers have traced to specific communities that maintained non-Roman Christian practices. Families named La Marie appear in the Languedoc records immediately before the Albigensian Crusade, and then vanish from those records during the Crusade period, reappearing in Catalonia, in the Basque Country, and in scattered communities in northern Italy under the same name or slight variations. The pattern of disappearance and reappearance follows the documented refugee routes of Cathar survivors fleeing the crusade. Now here is the question you have been asking yourself since I read that third name. Is my surname on this list? Or is my maternal grandmother's surname? Or my great-grandmother's surname before she married? Because here is what the genealogical record shows. These surnames were most commonly carried by women, passed mother to daughter, often converted into given names when the surname became too dangerous. A family that could no longer call themselves Magdalene without risk began naming their daughters Magdalene. A family that could no longer use Surnames as a family name began using it as a baptismal name for girls. The surname went underground into the given name and waited there for centuries, which means you may be carrying this lineage, not in your last name, but in the pattern of names that repeat in your female line across generations. Your grandmother's name, her mother's name, the names that appear again and again in the baptismal records of your maternal family. Those names are not random. Nothing in these communities was random. Every name was a memory. Every name was a coded message passed forward to descendants who might one day be living in a world where it was safe to decode it. That world is now. Where are you watching from right now? Write your country, and if you know it, your maternal grandmother's surname in the comments. You may find that others watching this video share your lineage across oceans and centuries. That is not coincidence. That is the persistence of something that Rome could not destroy, no matter how many lists it made. The Inquisition built a death list, but the families built something stronger. They built a memory system that outlasted every institution that tried to erase them. They encoded their identity in names, in symbols stitched into embroidery, in the specific flowers planted in family gardens, in the story told only to daughters on the night before they married. And those encoded memories are now being decoded because the archives are open, because the digitization is happening, because we are living in the exact moment that these lineages were preserved to reach. If any of these 7 names appear in your maternal line, you are not carrying a coincidence. You are carrying a continuation, a thread that runs from the women who stood at the tomb, through the refugees who fled the crusade, through the families who encoded themselves in names and symbols, all the way to you. The list that the Vatican built to destroy these families did not work, because you are here, and you are asking the question. And the answer has been in your family tree the whole time, waiting for someone with the courage to look. If you want to go deeper, the link for Holy Blood, Holy Grail is in the description. It is where this research begins. Subscribe and activate the bell, because in the next video we go deeper into the genealogical records and show you exactly how to trace these surnames in your own family tree, including the databases, the archives, and the specific search terms that bring these hidden lineages back to light. The research is ready, the records are accessible, and your ancestors are waiting to be found. We will meet there.